you are integrating that plan per person, and the data is clear to everyone, and it's aligned all the way to the compensation plans, to the sales plan, to the financials of the business. Everything is aligned.
Rumor has it you guys are feeling pretty good, which I thought was kind of interesting. Not surprising. I would expect nothing less from a Micah Stelter led Paris painting sales team. But you guys are actually halfway through the year ahead of your sales plan.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. It's actually been a huge blessing. It's hard to talk about how excited you are of where the sales team is going and the results in quarter one and early quarter two, because you're just not sure where you're going to land, and you don't want to, count your chickens,
Totally.
But out of Q2, we were 2.5 million ahead of our sales plan, which was,
so maybe just give the context,
awesome.
Kind of what does that mean? What give some context to set that number into.
Yeah, so Paris Painting last year did around 9.7. You could round up to 10 if you wanted to, and we were looking at an economy, getting a little bit more pinched, a little bit more unsure, looking at not sure where the marketing was going to go. Is it going to cost us more? So we set a plan in place for some growth, but not the kind of growth we had in like 2019, 2020. Or especially when the stimulation dollars were out there and people were in their houses during COVID and needed to get stuff going. We grew a lot in those times. So we set a plan in place that was aggressive, but still, like, we had to work for that. Probably around November, Caleb, who does all the Paris entity marketing, came into my office, and I lead his division as well as the sales division. And he said, I think if we buy leads like crazy in like late March and April, we can really get a head start. But it's like, I think I can get you this many leads, right? And it was like 150 leads or something like that per week.
Got to love it when you have a marketing person that brings good news into a door like that.
Yep. And for anyone listening that has not developed a person to do marketing yet, this is relatively new for Paris. In the last few years, we've been really, really able to develop that role. It used to be, me and a couple people deciding, let's go do flyer drops, and then working with a third-party vendor, right? But getting to the point now where we were able to have that role, he is awesome, and he thinks, so Nate Streeter, who does the marketing and Aleph Ventures, really kind of mentored Caleb, and Caleb's really taking that and rolling with the Paris entities. And so he's like, I think I can get us 150 bids. Well, I'm like, I don't have the sales team to do that.
Yeah.
I had, at that point, we were at like six humans that were doing that kind of sales volume. And I'm like, I really have to recruit. So in November, he tells me, here's the plan I think we can get after. And it really started getting me thinking about how I need to bring in salespeople much earlier in the year, especially for a seasonal business like painting, especially exterior focused painting companies. And so, I really shifted the strategy to, okay, I'm going to hire in January, February, and get people going as early as possible, and incur that cost to have them in the role, so I can get them trained to be ready to really rock out end of March and April. And that really paid off. And there's a lot we can go into the type of people that we hired and what that looked like. But at a high level, it was a marketing plan that showed, I think I can go get the market if we spend the money, but we need X amount of salespeople, right? We need to get to about 10 salespeople. And we need to bring them on earlier, so they're ready to capture early Q2 work. Because in a seasonal business like us, we're 80% exterior work, we need to have as much sold in Q2. And we keep the data that I looked at in the past kept showing I was late to it. The people I hired were good by May or June. So we kind of missed massive new person action in Q2. You had kind of legacy guys that continued to sell, but it wasn't until we shifted the strategy where we really capitalized sales volume in Q2 and then adding the sales volume we normally do well in Q3 is really putting us in a whole different place.
Okay, so let me get grounded a little bit on this, what the plan was, and then what was the original plan?
The original plan was to do like 10.2 million in production. Yep.
And then we're in Minnesota. That's in Minnesota. So roughly, do you have that kind of broken down of like Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4?
We typically want to do 40 to 45% of our production volume by end of Q2. And on the sales plan, around 50% of our sales plan by end of Q2. So most of that's going to hit Q2, but that's percentage wise about how we break it down.
Got it. Okay. So you were looking to be around $5 million, and then Caleb comes into the office kind of towards the end of Q1.
Mm-hmm.
And part of this is we just wrapped up like our Q3 kickoffs, and so we're evaluating how are we doing halfway through the year, and it's like, God, we're doing quite well. So let's get into like why you think that is, or why you think you're winning, why you think you guys have been able to grow. Part of it is a good marketing plan. That it's interesting as you share that, because I'm like, I talk to guys all the time that they go to marketers and they're like, here's what I want to do. Here's what I want to do. How refreshing to have a marketer come to you. And not just, obviously, God bless them, any marketer could sell you what they could do.
Yeah.
Obviously, when you say Caleb came to you, it's far more detailed. He's got data he's showing you applied to our business. So that's awesome. So yeah, like bring me back to the decision of like, all right, how did you retarget? How did you set a new plan? And then how did you start to kind of execute in Q2 to go get on track to a bigger plan?
Yeah. One of the mistakes I made was I kept building plans to what our business goals were. It seems kind of silly, but I wasn't building plans that were bigger than our goal for people and goals. Because I didn't want to take the risk on humans, right? And what if it didn't work out? And I didn't want to bring in more people than needed. So what really supercharged the business plan from 10 to what's now probably 12.5 to 13 million in sales is really being confident that we could get the market, right? And so
sure,
the marketing guy says, I think we can do this. And so I said, let's go do it. So I built the team for what we felt like we could reap from the market. And that data is, so the encouragement and also the work for anyone listening to this, that depending on what stage you're at, our marketing is so developed at a point now where we understand each zip code. We understand kind of key areas that are A groups, B groups, C groups. We have a very local and present strategy, and we watch how by zip code our effectiveness increases or decreases every single year. So we know the locations down to a zip code, in some senses down to zip code +4, of who's going to respond and what the success ratio is going to be in that area. What's the average job size of that area? So if we spend there, what will we expect to get? There's also an issue of geography. So I'm going to rabbit trail on this a little bit because I think there's a value here of what is strategically we're doing, right? And so down to the zip code level, we can see that data, and it's just what did we spend in that location? Well, how do you know that? You have to tie back what you spent to where you got the bids and reconcile a little bit on campaign planning there. I did direct mail in these areas. What bids did I get in those areas? And can I tie it back to direct mail? Right? You have to watch that. And many groups will do that kind of work for you to be able to help you keep that organized with special links or things like that, right? But you have to tie it back. But the overall data we're watching is what's the success ratio and average job size in that zip code. So some zip codes, it's like 10,000 and 45% success ratio. But that's not every location. So you can't build a scaling business model off of only those locations unless you want to only do a few million a year in that one area, right?
Sure.
We need to cover quite a bit of ground in geography to be able to do what we're doing. And you can't hit the same really good areas, 10 times with the same message in the Twin Cities here for us, right? So you have to have creative messaging, in some senses offers, that feel like, man, this is like the painter for this specific location. So you have to strategically communicate frequently enough where they don't get super fatigued and they still
Sure.
respond. And then you have to have the right mix to be able to organize that. Well, all that data is known, and Caleb studies it, and he's excellent at reasoning through it. He gets a lot of support and mentorship from Nate as well.
Yeah,
And
just to plug, so some of this, as you mentioned, Caleb is the prodigy of Nate Streeter. We did an episode with Nate a little while back, so you can go find that episode on All Ventures TV, where Nate explains a little bit of this framework of how do we tackle this beast of marketing. But yeah,
and you know, for the companies that Aleph has partnered with that are not Paris Painting, that like, well, you can't. It takes time and layered strategy over years to build what we're doing.
Yeah,
but the frameworks of it and the work of it can start today. You can start thinking like that to some degree today, and that is, and then it can get supercharged with more resource and the more specialists you put in that effort, right? If they have the right culture, the right mentality. High ROI marketers for painting businesses, I think, are really great. We're less concerned about building a ton of brand and impressions and that type of level of marketing. That matters a lot. How we communicate to homeowners matters a lot. We have to have that in our messaging, but it really needs to be tied back to how am I going to get a bid on the calendar, right? And it also ties back to customer experience as well, right? The people have to generally feel good about you. So those are metrics we watch in concert. But Caleb walks into my office and says, I think we can go bigger. I think there's more in the market for us right now. And actually, you know, sneak peek, he just came in my office last week, way earlier than last year. And he's like, I already got the 2025 plan, right? So we're moving that up even months ahead of November, right? We're already planning what's the sales team going to look like in 2025? What's the marketing plan? What can we go do? That's part of the fun of being over 10 million is we have some of those resources and pieces in play that it just keeps building on itself, right? So he comes to my office, says, let's do this plan. And I'm like, all right, great. But we wanted to be smart about it, right? We didn't want to bet the farm. So we built a plan that was reasonable and we felt good about. And we said, let's let the trend tell us we should shift the plan. So every month we are watching the trend this year. And it's looking in Q1, it's really hard to know. There's not enough data, right? So you've got to really get into Q2 before you really know. And for us, good signs in May, great signs in June. By the end of June, it was like, okay, we're on trend for $12.5 million in sales. We changed the sales plan and all of the budgets in late April, May, because we felt strong enough about where things were headed. And I think the big takeaway for me, and I, you know, none of this is like, wow, this is a team effort, right? None of this is like Micah's intellect. None of it is that. I feel like I'm a good culture steward. I feel like I have great meetings and consistency with the team, but it's the people, man. It's the people and the way they're thinking and the way we're looking at the data. That combination all together as a team has been so fun. And because we all met together in a monthly meeting, we watched where the financials were going. We saw where the team was going. We saw the edits we'd have to make if it didn't work out. And we just talked openly about that as a marketing, sales, production division. So everyone was aligned, right? Sometime around April or early May, it was like, you know, Mark, who leads our production division, is also becoming integrator within the Paris entities, is thinking to himself, you know, what do I have to hire for production? And we just all worked together where I said, I feel confident we're going to sell it. So let's get that other production manager in here and let's keep building ahead of when we really need it. So we were able to get almost everyone onboarded and going before it really got crazy. And I think that's a big reason why we're able to get the follow through on having this plan accelerate.
And backing up, it's interesting. So Caleb comes in, he's like, hey, you know, I have this confidence. You got to have the confidence in the marketing first. Then you got to go hire. So is this a thing where like I think you said you came through Q1 with like 6 salespeople,
Yeah.
Was this a thing where you were planning on adding another 1 or 2, but Caleb comes to you, and so now you're going to go add another 3 or 4? Is that how that
Honestly,
kind of played out?
had we kept the original plan, it wasn't anybody to hire. Maybe
Got it.
one.
Okay.
Maybe one, right? There really wasn't. It was kind of keep it stable. And that was the approach we came into the year thinking kind of
Got it.
at this point last year, that's kind of what we were thinking. We'll ride it out and see what happens. But some of the confidence of, I think the market can bear this. There's risk there, but it was based on data, right? And then, and it made logical sense. So I see what's the bid, what are the bids that we could get? So then how do we build a team to service that? Right. So then I go to work thinking, what would be the team? He's thinking, what would be the cost? And we're putting that all together in Q4 of last year to basically present to the whole management team and, shareholders within the company to say, I think we can do this. And we landed on, let's start with plan A and a budget for plan A, but let's build a plan B and a budget for plan B. And we ended up switching to plan B, which was smart. We'd never done that before, right? And I think in the past I screwed this up a lot, right?
This is a helpful clarifier. So some of this was when Caleb came to you at the end of Q1. There was some preceded work going back to like the end of Q4 of 2023, where it was like, this is a stretch plan. So you guys had done somewhat of a stretch plan. So when Caleb came to you, he was like, yeah.
For clarity's sake, it was November 2023 that he said, I think we can do this plan. So it was last year.
Okay, I see. Okay.
Right. And so it was early this year. We're already thinking about it in July. So we're advancing that. And there's reasons for that, right? Which is there's a lot of assets and content we can grab to catch the clients we really need to grab in each zip code in the areas we're trying to go after that we can do now and be way more creative because we're already building the strategy of how we're going to get their attention next year. But we have to build now because most of these plans get built and finalized in the winter. And for us, exterior is a big focus. It's hard to get a lot of great pictures.
Got it.
People, right? So
I'm tracking. So in November, it's like, hey, here's a conservative plan. Caleb's like, hey, just so you know, I have confidence that I could take us here.
Mm-hmm.
We go into 2024 saying, hey, we have that in our back pocket. Let's kind of operate assuming the more conservative plan.
Yeah.
And now we've gotten halfway through the year and it's like we've positioned ourselves to go get that bigger plan.
Yep.
Sweet.
And my big takeaway is from now on, I want to get early insight into what the marketing department thinks we could go do, what they're confident in. If they're looking at the data and not confident about getting the bid flow, I would change my strategy as well, right? But if they're confident and they feel like they can go do that, then I'm going to build a plan to do it. But I'm also I never had built a plan A and B. Now we've always had a contingency plan. So what we built to what we'd like to do and then built contingencies if we don't. This was the first year that I built a plan that we want to hit and the contingency of better. Right. We also have our worse, right? But the plan A was the top, and then there's a plan B, which is okay, we're fine. And then if we're off that one, there's more contingencies below that of what we would do. This is the first year I built a plan to hire more people than I think, take on a little bit more risk than I think, but it was fueled by data from the market that they thought we could go get these people, these bids, right? And that played out, and it was like a light bulb for me in the year where I was like, this is way more fun. this is actually, I feel like I made a plan to scale, and then we watched it and it worked. And it wasn't as simple as just knowing the plan, right? We can go.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. There's this quote from Dwight D. Eisenhower that he says, plans are worthless. Planning is everything. Yeah. So there's an element of, I know that you didn't just make a plan and then sit back and watch. So I'm curious though, but like you said, that was a difference from like the year before. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
You planned in a different way.
Yeah.
What kind of behaviors and action did doing that lead to that made a difference?
Yeah. So I think it affected a few things. So it affected recruiting. How many people do I bring in? It also put some of the other departments on the ready, the leaders. We didn't necessarily bring to the whole team that we were maybe planning to do 12 million in sales, right? So we had two plans. We had a $12 million plan and we had a $10 million plan. We started into it, but the leaders knew in each department that we could shift to that. So they were sort of subtly working on who would I bring in if we were on trend for bigger numbers. And I think knowing that ahead of time at the start of the year really helped fuel people to just think about what would happen and solve that without it being kind of a knee-jerk reaction to scale. We kind of pre-planned what the scale might look like, and made sure we had enough coverage for it. So as I started going into Christmas time, I'm already having informational interviews with salespeople, and I know I have to bring in 4, right? And I brought in 4 full-time and then 1 actual part-time, a temporary. So it was actually probably 4.5, I guess. That's what I went after. And so that got the team to 10 and a half humans. And as I started looking, I was really thinking a lot about that recruiting plan and who are the people that are going to be, based on what I know in the last 6 years of doing this, what do I know about the best people I've ever had? And I started reverse engineering that a bit and building out a model of person that works well for painting company salespeople that are consistent, can deliver a good result, and are happy to be here, right? So that I started looking for that, and I had enough time to really work through a lot of different people and get a lot of that interviewing work done. So I had it all set up, and almost everyone basically on deck to hire before I even got to February 1, right? And that was a game changer for my psyche of just feeling like I'm ahead of the plan, because I knew they needed to start training in February and March and be ready by April, not like learning in April. They needed to be ready. So the hiring, put that on the shelf of the right candidate to hire, but we also needed to do capacity planning. So we looked at the bid flow and how we thought we would get estimates. And then we built out per person, what is their goal and what is their capacity to do estimates. Another big gotcha I've had in the past is I haven't planned adequately for, I'm having a baby and I'm going to be out a week and a half. I'm going on vacation. I haven't looked at that. So I had surprises, like 2 or 3 people would be out of the office. And that it was like, well, they're great. It wasn't like their fault. It was just planning of who's here and do we have the bid. We're going to get the bid flow, but do we have the capacity on people's calendars to be able to take and estimate these jobs? So we built a tool to see every single week of the year what people's commitment is in terms of bid flow and when people are going to be out. So I saw in January my risk for late May. I knew late May would be a little lower. We'd go from 140 to 150 bids down to like 110 in a couple weeks in May. So I built a bigger bid target earlier and after to be able to accommodate knowing I was going to have a slump. And that, I would just call that a capacity calendar, right? It's just mapping every human that's doing sales every day. How many bids can they do? And then what's the total? And then I had somebody in the office watching the actual calendars and the actual bids we were open for versus what we said. And I got 2 weeks ahead of that. And every once in a while I was like, hey, Jimmy, that's not my sales team. I'll just use that as an example name. Hey, Jimmy, looks like you said you were going to do 15, but you're only open for 12. And it'd be like, oh shoot, I forgot to like remove a block on my calendar for the bid calendar. Or it was like, no, that's my reality, but I'm gonna do a little bit more the next week. Okay, got it. So we just updated it and it still worked. But little things like what I'm talking about with capacity management, that's a lot of like human touch points and tools and looking at how everything aligns to the overall financial plan for the business. We've developed a lot of those things over the years. And it's this last year, I'm like, man, this all works really well to get clear and feel like you know where you're going. And it's just a reminder of if you're clear on a plan and you are integrating that plan per person and the data is clear to everyone and it's aligned all the way to the compensation plans, to the sales plan, to the financials of the business, everything is aligned. And then you're watching it every every few weeks, every month, and making adjustments to make sure you're on track to the plan. It's just those simple habits that tell you when you're off, and then you make adjustments, or you see you're ahead and you're getting excited and you feel like you have clarity. And that it takes some time to develop some of those tools based on the pain that comes from what you're trying to do, right?
Yeah. And I think there's an element of time being your friend, but time really being your friend when you have clear data to stack up. And I think that this is probably something that is going to get harder for folks. So if you don't have clarity on the data, then you don't really have clarity on some of the impact of, so like things like that, right? Seeing, 12, 13, 20 weeks before you're going to have a slump, seeing that you're going to have a slump,
Yeah.
and planning for it.
Yeah.
But I think that if folks aren't like that in a tighter economy, the growth and the investment is going to be really scary, because you don't feel as in control of it.
Right.
So I imagine part of some of this, so to go hire 4 people when you were like, the conservative plan was to hire 0. It's like, what gives you confidence to actually go do that? It's having that data and knowing the gap that you need to close.
Yes. And I think a thing to pay attention to, I think there's some value in this mental framework. If you as an individual always think about, hey, good news, you're the problem, like you as an individual, which means you always have the ability and capacity to evaluate your situation based on what data you do have or the pain you feel. And you can lay out a plan of, how would I address not getting got by this thing ever again? Right.
Yeah.
Well, I have years of being in this role for Paris Painting. And there's years that I got through, 365 days. And I was like, okay, I've got a list that I don't want to hit me in the next 365 days. And I build a system or a tool, even if it's rudimentary, to get insight and help not get got by that again. Right.
Yeah.
And when you stack years of that as a business, doing kind of running with a team, that gets better and better and better. And then what I've continued to iterate is I go from like a G sheet. I go from, it's not a tool, to a G sheet where I can kind of test it and get insight. And then I go from G sheet to a better G sheet that's more intelligent. And then I go from a more intelligent G sheet to building it in our software. Right. And that has been a really great iteration to bring kind of the practicals of what is creating the pain and what is operationally keeping me back, or keeping our salespeople back or our marketing people back. And you can do something today. You can build a tool to visualize it. You can ask people what they think, kind of poke it around a little bit with the team and see if it makes sense. But you can iterate those tool sets to all of a sudden you can either, for those that have a software that has some of that adaptability, you can go build some of that view in that tool, right? You can create a report that kind of tells you those data points. But a G Sheet can work really well for companies, 6 million or less, right? It works really well to just give you at least a better look than what your feelings will give you. And that's been, I've continued to kind of think about how does that happen? How do I get more effective? And I think it starts with that thinking, and then it moves to a G sheet, and then it moves to a better G sheet, and then moves into a system. And then I have the data faster. I can see it more clear, and it's the right thing to look at, which has been, I think, really helpful, because in order to scale, you have to pick up all the breadcrumbs that you might be missing, which is true in our marketing. Our marketing is so much more sophisticated now because we know things about certain zip codes down to the people. And then we went and got pictures and photo shoots with those people. And then we grabbed all the jobs that we did on that street and put it back on a postcard or a flyer that has those people's picture and how many projects we did on their home. And then we go back to the neighborhood with their great review and say, hey, you should choose us. And then they call us, right? And there's a collaborative effort of getting deep into the data, knowing what you're looking at, getting better and better at that, and then planning and executing off of that in a really clear way.
So, that is, so that's unpacking kind of some of the strategy, the planning, et cetera. but this is like, there's a real grind to like bring 4 people into a company and then get them effective and on track and stuff. Like, bring me into that, like the actual work of being a sales manager, like of actually, you can't sell it, but you got to sell it through a team.
Yep.
What's been on your mind, or what kind of has been some wins from the first half of the year?
Yeah, I think, and so I think for the last year, I've been thinking I'd like to hire a sales manager, but this year I was still like, oh, I think that's my role again this year, right?
Sure.
And so while I love it and I love developing the Paris team, it is getting to a point where it's outside of just me being able to do it. And but this year I saw the plan and I was like, no, if I get the right people, I think I can handle it. And I have some senior leaders in the team that are willing to lean in and help coach and support and develop. So we kind of stepped into it. I stepped into it excited. I started recruiting off the model I built, and I brought a few interviews in, but a lot of people referred in by people that know the company and know what we're about, or they know somebody who's having a lot of fun in their job. And that's been great, because I think first tier networks for recruiting are just the best there is, right? People that know the role. And as the team grows, that it even becomes a more effective strategy, because the network, spinoffs are even more. There's more people that you can grab. And so I have done most of my recruiting through first tier networks of just, hey, I've got a buddy. So the better you bring in people, the better people that start to get referred to you as well, right?
Totally.
People that are like, they would
That's a
never
good
refer
point.
somebody, right? They would never refer somebody that was, kind of a joke, right? Their reputation's on the line, right? So the people that I hire that I love, if they refer somebody, I'm like, I will talk to them right now, right? I will talk to them right now. And I talked to somebody last year that was like, I love it. This sounds awesome. I don't think now is the time, but maybe in the future. Well, who's on deck for my 2025 sales team? That person, I'm going to call them again and see if we can get that going. I have a list of, 2 to 3 of those people, but then there's 2 to 3 on every salesperson's mind of who might be interested to come in. So I love first tier networks that way.
Yeah.
Because you can get such high, think of it in a sales term, your success ratio is so much higher for how many people you meet with. Right.
Yeah.
So while it seems, maybe like obvious, I talk to all the people all the time. Like, how do you find good people? And you need to have a good network, right? You need to be doing that network. But as you build the right people in the company, that continues to get better and better. And kind of the things I look for. So here's a nugget of what to look for. So high customer service focus is what I'm looking for. They don't have to have a career in painting, and they do not have to have a career in sales. So they need to have transferable skills that make sense for the role, but high customer service focus, high compliance ability to a proven method. So they can be compliant to a process, right? Not a maverick, not like a wild cowboy. Like, we have a process that works. Can they be compliant to it? Natural desire to solve issues in their environment. So this is like, no matter where they are, they have to improve what's around them. They just have a driving need to do that. Whether they get paid or not, it's just ingrained in who they are. High retention ability of information. When they learn something, it doesn't like slip out of their mind. They keep it, they hold it. And you can hear that in interviews, like when they say, oh, I read a book, and here's like, you have a high retention ability, Hoken. Like, you'll talk about quotes and books and things you learn, right? Whenever we've talked, and that ability to hold something that's meaningful, right? That's huge.
Sure.
Emotional intelligence of themselves and others. So are they emotionally intelligent? Are they aware of their surroundings? Are they aware of the social dynamic? And also within themselves, are they aware of what's going on? That's really important. Active desire for personal growth. Are they actively investing in themselves and want to get from A to B? And that's not just maybe financially. It's how do I read better books? How do I meet better people? How do I learn more and grow personally? And then the ability to sustain healthy habits and routines. Those 7 things are like what I think all of the best people on my team have every one of those. And what's been amazing is if you can go find people that have those traits and you want to do work with them, like they're good people, right?
Sure.
You can find them in nonprofit organizations, or you can find them at other places where they're just working super hard and doing all those things, and they care a lot, but they're making a lot less than they could selling paint jobs, right? It's hard if you want to sell paint jobs and right out the gate you want to make $300,000 a year. It's not the industry to make that out the gate. Can you make that? I'm sure somebody could figure that out as a salesperson with commercial sales and that kind of thing, but that's going to be a challenge, right?
Yeah.
And so, but to be able to set a vision of after year one, you can be on trend for 100 to 150. That's a great vision, right? For many people that I'm talking about. So I went and found those people. I hired them. It was in the network. One person actually already worked with us and he pivoted into the role. One was my brother-in-law who I brought on because I was talking with him and I'm like, doggone it, you hit my model. This could be great. And it was at a perfect timing at a family gathering. And I just said, you should consider this. And so brought him on. And then a few others were referred in from other salespeople, and brought the team on, coaching them and training them. My onboarding process is pretty intense, but if it goes well, you know after 30 days if they're on the right trend metrics to get to that they're learning and going well. But basically I sit with them in the office for 2 days and we just go deep system, deep sales model. What are all of the things that drive results and success? And then and then we go in the field, and I'm usually doing 8 bids with them. And many times I'm the salesperson and they're watching, right? So I sell and it's their bid, but I'm the one that sells and they just watch. And then eventually I start to transfer it where they are leading it and I'm just supporting. And so we'll do that for the first week into the second week. And then I have them go watch other salespeople and I kind of move them into that. So they should be at 20 to 30 bids within the first couple of weeks of exposure, as well as some mock bids and doing some estimating training and things like that. But in about 2 weeks, they have enough to be able to go start doing their own. And that's a really scary moment that you and I have both felt that.
Yeah, totally.
Where you're like, oh, it's on me now. And then the rest of the learning is through the team and through, I built a learning management platform courses for sales. And so you can go watch and be trained on items if you get a little rusty. And we have a playbook that we built that's kind of lays out some of the core things that they can do to be successful. But a lot of it is just more exposure to estimates, asking a lot of questions, and then weekly one-on-ones very consistently and for the first 60 days. And then after that, they start to get their feet under them and they need less and less like high direction, high support. And you can just be there to kind of like make sure they feel good, go out maybe once a week instead of we're out 8 times in a week, 6 to 8, right? And then they get to where they're self-regulating and it's like, I only need a one-on-one every other week. I know what I'm doing. I'm clear. My plan is clear. I'm coaching them once a month so that, a really good coaching event once a month if needed. If the results are really good and they're feeling great and they have the team support, they can decide if we want to do that or not. But the goal of my sales team is I want them to be like business owners within our business. And so I built their compensation model like a little P&L. It's here's the marketing department, what you have to pay them. Here's what you have to pay overhead for the sales division. And then here's your compensation. And they monitor the results and keep accountable to their own business plan in that. And the goal is, can I be really autonomous in my day-to-day schedule as long as I hit my goals? Yeah, the answer is yes, right? You have to be a good team player. You have to make sure there's good handoffs. You have to make sure you're not creating chaos. But everyone's been so great. The margins have been great. The team is like, I love these new salespeople. They're handing these projects off. They care. They're communicative. They're responsive. They're not dropping the ball. I mean, there's mistakes that are made, but it's not from being careless. It's just learning, right? And they learn fast and they remember what they learned. And all of that is playing out along with the sales results. And the team at this point, after all that work in late Q1, early Q2, my need to be kind of in chaos management out with the team has dropped a lot at this point, because they're way more developed. And so
So,
relate.
well, I'm curious on that. Like, obviously, last year, or in years past, maybe I should say, it's not like you were hiring the opposite of those 7 things. So maybe those 7 things have always somewhat been what you were desiring. But I'd just be curious, why do you think, like, is there 1 or 2 of those traits in that 7 that you feel like you've focused in or honed in or kind of cracked the code on that makes this team special?
I would say that I'm decently emotionally intelligent. I'm decent with people. So I have a decent pulse on people, but I didn't have a model of person. I didn't
Sure.
model that out. Right. So once I built the model end of last year and I started hiring on that, my hit rate got a lot higher. Right. Because I've gotten hit and kind of taken for a ride a few too many times over the last 2 to 3 years. I've hired and had to let people go last year and the year before that. And that was, and I paid attention to the pain of that and started iterating a model that I think would have solved that pain. And I think the biggest ones are like the biggest ones would be the high compliance to a proven process. You're going to do the process. Your desire to solve issues in your environment and retain information. Those 3 have been like really powerful ones to look for in the interviewing. I think I went more off feeling of, oh, I kind of like this person. I think they're kind of like other people I've hired versus tactically looking for these items in a behavioral interview with someone.
Yeah, because those things are not, those are, correct me if I'm wrong, those are maybe more, those 2 things you mentioned, or 2 traits that you highlighted, those are more based off of like prior experience or prior history, not so much. You can't feel those things in an interview as much. Is that right?
Yeah, right. They come through. So just getting all the way down to practicals, what I've heard is when I'm talking to somebody about their past role and they're like, yeah. And so what I did there is they didn't really have very good systems. And so I built a system for them. And because I was like, I can't work like this. So I suggested, and that what if we did it like this? And they said, yeah, go ahead and figure it out. So then I built the system and that got a lot better and it got way more organized. And like, when I hear that, that's like natural desire to solve issues in their environment. Right. It was bad and I just dealt with it. It was, no, I suggested respectively, we should do it this way. And they said, let's do it. And it went really well. Right.
Sure.
That's a good example of what I'm listening for. Retention, that one is like, can they recall goals and stories of their past roles? Can they recall key features of what they learned and how they developed? Is it too high level and vague? Do they not remember? I'm looking for it like that. Right. Certainly there's a performance background of, okay, what were your goals? What are your actuals? Are you like, I do care about goal accountability in that, but it's not goal accountability. Did you have a target and hit it? It's more, as a person, what's your wiring, right? Because there's 2 things to affect results. There's skill and commitment. Commitment is, are you going to show up? Do you care? Are you bought in and do you want to get after it? Skill is, do you know how to do the thing that leads to a result? So you could have the skill, but no commitment. And what that's going to do is you have this, your results are going to go bad because you didn't show up. You didn't put in the time. You didn't put in the energy. You didn't ask the right questions. You didn't really care. So what I want in an interview is to find the people that are going to rarely have a commitment issue. Because if you don't have a commitment issue, if you're high commitment to just yourself, for goodness sakes, right? I think at that point, I need to maintain a culture that you don't feel robbed by. You have to feel uplifted by, and you have to want to be a part of. That's my job. But I don't have to help you figure out how to show up, right? Or how to respond. I don't have to train that. That's already innate. What I can train is the skill. So if somebody's always committed and willing to be committed, because I have the skill of creating a good culture, and I am doing that, and I will always do that. So I know I can deliver that. So if you have commitment, I know as your skill improves, your results are going to skyrocket. Sure. And I know how to develop that skill, right? And so the commitment means they're going to ask the right questions, and they're not going to just let it go. When they have a struggle, they're going to say, I need help, and here's what I need help with, because they're committed. So then uncommitted people just kind of don't ask questions, and they're not that curious about their results, right? They're not that curious about how they're doing. They kind of live in feelings a little bit. But when you are committed, you're going to ask questions because you do not like the feeling of failure. You do not like feeling off, and you're innately curious about how to destroy your results in a great way, right? Yeah. And so you ask a bunch of questions, and what's amazing about that is I have most of the answers. This is not a complex business in painting. This is true nationally as well, right? It's not a complex business. It's just, are we doing the work, and do we have the skill to know how to do the process? And that's one of the things I love about it, is that if I bring in the right people, they can have that success, which ultimately leads to financial growth for them, and ultimately leads to financial growth for the company. And it's a real win-win-win.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. So we're moving. Yeah, you're moving into Q3. I had a plan. What's on your mind, like, for the second half of the year? It's kind of like, what do you think? It's still a lot of that plan is in front of you. So what's on your focus, or things that you're going to be paying attention to, or things that you're baking into your calendar to make sure you get to ensure the second half of the year goes as well as the first?
Yeah. So the benefit I'm afforded to a sales team that's self-regulating and executing, improving that every week, is that I can trust it's going to go well more, and I can do more work on the business versus in the business, versus if the trend starts to drop, I'm in the business right now solving.
Yeah.
Right now it's going well, so I have some time to update playbooks, update things that are going to help the existing team and the future team that I may hire for next year, right? So some of that work is being done right now. The other thing I would just say is, it's mundane, but you can't let your foot off the gas. You have to stay pretty vigilant, even when it's good. So
Totally.
So for sales, it's like, yeah, it's good. It's good now, but it's not over until it's over. I like doing my trend meetings. I like getting clear with every single person in the normal rhythm from the beginning of the year, when I didn't know, and now when I have a better idea of the trend. I still do all of those rhythms. I have not stopped them because it looks kind of good. I keep them because it could be better, and it also could get worse. And I want to make sure we're staying clear together as a team. And so it's really not pulling off the rhythms that work, keeping consistent at those, even when it's great. But it certainly is a different meeting with a salesperson that's on trend, on budget, feeling great. That's like, what else can we dive in and develop? I have one guy who's so ahead of his sales plan, but every time we get together, he just has tons of questions just to get even better. And we just have fun talking about it, because I'm not talking about how do we get your numbers back to where they need to be, right? And I have some of those meetings too, but they're all such great people. It's just, we're just updating the plan and getting excited, and we're still doing the same development. But it's a very different workload when the team's got it, they figured it out, and the investment of my time into the right people with the right tools and process is paying off.
Yeah. That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Well, dude, let's wrap this up. Kudos to you on a great first half of the year. Don't rest on your laurels.
Absolutely not.
It ain't over till it's over. But that's exciting, man. It's encouraging. And definitely too, there's kind of an element, I would say, having been in kind of the sales world, it's high highs and low lows in the sales world. But what's cool is, and part of the blessing of being on a sales team, is you can really lift the morale, the energy of a business, right? If you're a sales team that's going out there and you're engaged and accountable and like you're getting after it, it just really brings the whole team. So like walking back, I mean, everybody's pretty pumped on how things are going. So kudos to you, man, in leading the charge in that. Kudos to the team, and let's stay after it here.
Love it. Always want to talk to you, Hoken. We'll talk soon.
All right, brother. Talk soon.
See ya.